to the Audit Exit Conference. At this time, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Calvin Watts.
Good evening. Thank you, Vice President Bettinger, members of the board, KSD team, Ms. Zantello, and to our State Auditor's Office team. I want to begin by welcoming everyone this evening, first of all, with the reminder that, as we all know, leadership and management are what allow us to move our organization forward. We cannot do this work alone. Leadership in itself is often defined as doing the right thing. And management is often described or defined as doing things in the right way. And so while those who lead people and those who manage processes are not perfect, and we are included in that group, we strive to make perfect progress. We strive in that way toward improved systems and processes and ultimately improved results. Why? For the purpose of enabling our district to address the needs of our students, our staff, and our families in an equitable way. So again, on behalf of our board of directors, I want to thank you to our board of directors and our staff and team for their roles that they play in the budgeting process. And certainly thank you to our State Auditor's Office for your work and your efforts to help support us and help to hold us accountable. I will now introduce our team of leaders who supports this work specifically, Dr. Jewel Harmon, Chief Accountability Officer, and Mr. Ben Rarick, Executive Director of Budget and Finance, to help introduce our team and this process this evening. Thank you so much, Dr. Harmon.
Good evening, Vice President Bettinger, members of the board, Dr. Watts, Ms. Zantello. We're happy to be here. Thank you, Dr. Watts, for this. This is our annual audit process. It is the habit and intention of Kent School District to always end our audit session with a report out from the state auditor to the board. More detail will come from Mr. Rarick and the State Auditor's Office staff. But I want to give a special thank you to the Budget and Finance team for all of the work that they've done to support the state auditors in providing the resources needed to get this done, especially during this time. So Mr. Rarick, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Harmon. So at this time, I think I'm going to be giving a brief introduction to the members of the audit team that are with us today, and I'm trying to expand my my view, but Deanna, you're the only one that I see at this moment. Are there other members with us today?
I'm here, Ben. Okay. Alex Barrett's here.
All right, so it's my pleasure to introduce the two lead members of our audit team that were with us here this year. Alexander Barrett is a audit manager with the State Auditor's Office, and Deanna Kovalevich, did I get it right, Deanna?
Yes.
Was and has been our audit lead now. I believe this was her third year, and value the work that they bring to sustaining fiscal responsibility and health in our district. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to the State Auditor team.
I want to go ahead and present your desktop there, Diana, and kudos to Ben on getting both last names pronounced correctly. That was not an easy task with our two last names, so good job there.
Can you tell me if you're seeing two screens or multiple screens?
We're just seeing your one screen, Diana, but we can see your notes, so I think it's your secondary screen that we're seeing.
Okay, give me one sec. Let me try this again.
Or if you press to start the PowerPoint, those notes might go away. Sorry about the technical difficulties. We're more used to Teams than we are Zoom, so we'll get there though.
Apologies about that. Give me one sec. Let's try this one more time. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I have a little bit. Are you guys still able to see my screen or no?
Not seeing it now.
Okay, let me try one more time.
And I can always show mine if need be, Diana.
I'm so sorry. Give me
That's
one
okay. It
sec.
happens. We're all used to it now with the pandemic, I think. So.
Alrighty. Does this seem to work?
Yes, you got it.
Perfect. Thanks, Diana. So yes, I'm Alex Barrett. I'm the audit manager for Team South King County. Been with the team now for almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years here in about a month. Previously, I was with North King County, and then before that, I was with Port Orchard out on the Olympic Peninsula. Not able to join us today was Evans Anglin. He had a family emergency, so he had to step out, but he was the audit supervisor again this year. I believe it's at least his third year. I believe it's his third year, just like Diana on the audit. And of course, Diana was the audit lead this year again, and that's always a big push for me on this team is to have those familiar faces come back every year. So that way we can develop those relationships and really develop that trust as well with each other. And the more we get to know each other, I think the smoother it goes as it goes along these audits. So I think last year we also had this PowerPoint. So I think you might be my first entity that it's the second go around with the PowerPoints, because I'm pretty sure I think you were one of my first ones last year when we switched over with the pandemic to doing it in a PowerPoint. In the past, we provided you with all these documents, which hopefully you got last week. We know that was a big push last year that they said, hey, it would be nice if we got the board mentioned it'd be nice if we got those documents a little bit more in advance. So hopefully you got those documents last week, had an opportunity to look over those. We'll go over all those documents in high level today. But if you have any questions that we don't cover, just feel free to ask, or you can ask me at any time. It doesn't have to be today. It could be a week from now, a month from now, a year from now. You come up with a question, just feel free to reach out to us. That's what we're here for. So just a reminder before we get started on the audit results for results that matter, always like to bring up our mission vision statement here and just remind everybody that our mission is to increase trust in government. And the way we do that is by providing independent, transparent examinations of your financial transactions and records and policies. And hopefully along the way, we're also finding out ways to improve efficiency and effectiveness in your operations. I always say, we don't want to just be an agency that comes in and gives you an opinion on your financial statements and writes recommendations and accountability and the federal grant compliance. We also want to be an agency that helps you serve your constituents and stakeholders in the best way possible. We actually have a slide that talks to that here at the end of it, or I talked a little bit about that at the entrance conference. But if you ever want to know what some of those resources are that help you serve your constituents in an efficient, effective way, or more efficient, effective way, I should say, just reach out to us. There's lots of tools out there, lots of things being developed all the time. So I always just say, if you're discussing something as a management group, as a board, you're wondering what resources are available, if any, just reach out to us. Happy to do that research for you. And with that, I will pass it over to Diana now to start getting into the audit results. Again, just a reminder that we did the financial statement, accountability, and federal grant compliance audit for fiscal year 2020. Same audits we do every year. So with that, I'll pass it to you, Diana.
Thank you. So like Alex has mentioned, we have completed an accountability audit with the scope of being September 1, 2019 through August 31, 2020. And the purpose of an accountability audit is to determine whether the district has complied with state laws, with regulations, contracts, and with its own policies. In addition, these audits also look at whether, in general, the district has adequate controls to safeguard public resources. And you'll see that under the results in brief section, the district operations complied in all material respects with applicable state laws, regulations, and its own policies, and provided adequate controls over the safeguarding of public resources. We also want to make a note that we do not examine every transaction or every policy. Therefore, no information would be provided on areas that were not examined. And on the next slide, included on this slide, you will see areas that we identified for further testing in our audit. Specifically, what we looked at this year was self-insurance for unemployment, workers' compensation, and health and welfare. And for this area, we gain an understanding of the district's processes to estimate and set aside funds for future unemployment and for workers' compensation claims. We also gained an understanding of the district's review of and payment of claims, along with your monitoring procedures over third-party administrators. Another area that we looked at is professional learning. And for this area, we specifically gain an understanding of your processes regarding the professional learning allocation and the costs recorded to Activity 34. We also selected costs that were charged to Activity 34, and we tested them to determine whether the expenditures meet the professional learning requirements. Another area that we selected was local revenue subfund. And for this section, we reviewed the district's documented plan for differentiating between expenditures of local and state revenues. And we also verified whether the district allocated costs to the local subfund as described in your plan. And we then recalculated those allocations to verify if they were accurately and consistently applied. Another section that we looked at is basic enrollment. Actually, I skipped one, supplemental contracts. For supplemental contracts, we specifically gained an understanding of what supplemental contracts were in effect for the school year 2020, and we tested supplemental contracts for compliance with contract limitations in the state law. We also looked at basic enrollment, and for this section, we tested basic enrollment FTE that was reported by the Kent School District, and we looked at the 11th grade at the Kent Meridian High School for February 2020. Another section that we selected is compliance with public works projects, specifically focusing on change orders. And for this section, we looked at the district's policies to identify the level of authority over change orders. And we also selected projects with change orders and performed compliant testing. Last but not least, we looked at the financial condition. And for this area, we just evaluated the financial statements, and we looked at various ratios to see if there's any indicators of any issues, but we didn't note any issues or any concerns. Any questions on the accountability areas that we tested?
Doesn't look like we have any questions, Diana.
Okay. The next section that we'll be talking about is the financial audit results. Once again, the audit period is the school year 2020, and we do a financial audit every single year. And for this year, we issued a unmodified clean opinion, which is what you want to receive because it gives assurance that the financial statements are stated fairly and they are materially correct. And the objective of financial statement audit is to issue an opinion on whether the information included in the financial statements can be relied upon. In regards to the financial statement audit, we know that this district prepares their financial statements using the modified accrual method of reporting, which is authorized by the state of Washington through the school district accounting manual. And auditing standards require us to disclose in the report whether the local government chooses to report their financial statements under any reporting method other than US GAAP. And as a result, we are required to issue a second or a dual opinion, noting that the district chose not to report using the US GAAP, which is something that you would expect to see for your type of entity. Our audit was conducted in accordance with government auditing standards, and these standards require us to gain an understanding of the district's internal controls to prepare financial statements. If we were to identify any kind of concerns or weaknesses with that process that could, or let's say did result in errors in the financial statements, we would be required to bring that to your attention. However, we didn't identify any issues with your processes. And another thing we wanted to bring to your attention is auditing standards also require us to consider compliance with various applicable laws, regulations, contracts, and if there is any non-compliance that could affect the fair presentation of your financial statements. And you will see in the last section of this slide that we identified no significant deficiencies in internal controls. We identified no deficiencies that we consider to be material weaknesses. And we noted no instances of non-compliance where material to your financial statements, which is great, but that's what you want to hear. In regards to your financial statements, professional audit standards also require us that we share with you if there were any uncorrected misstatements that remain in the audited financial statements. And we would like to let you know that there were no uncorrected misstatements in the audited financial statements, and there were no material misstatements that were corrected by management during the audit. And in regards to the financial statements audit, we also wanted to let you know that this report included an emphasis of matter paragraph which relates to COVID-19. However, our opinion is not modified with respect to this matter. Any questions on the financial statement report before we move on?
So you said you sent all these documents beforehand too, that we can look at them?
Correct.
Okay. Forgive me, I didn't see them, so I'll look for those in my email.
I have a question. Going back to your first slide, if you wouldn't mind, I believe it's the first one. Yes, okay. You said under unmodified opinion issued. No, that's not it. One more, I think. Was there one more? No. Oh, go forward. Sorry. It was
Maybe.
You're going, yep, go back one more, Diana. You're accidentally going forward to the federal grant compliance.
Oh.
Go back one more. Yep, keep going back. Right
Okay.
here, is this what you're looking for?
yes.
Yep.
On your bullet point 2 under unmodified opinion issue. I don't quite understand when you say
It's
adverse opinion. Can you explain that a bit to me?
absolutely, and unmodified is kind of a counterintuitive term. So unmodified doesn't always sound great, right? But basically the assertion is anytime a district comes out with financial statements, the second you publish those or give those financial statements to us, you're saying, hey, these are materially correct. So then when we come in and give an opinion on it, we're saying, yep, we agree with that. We're not modifying what you're saying. We're giving an unmodified opinion, which is clean, basically just backing up that, yep, we agree with the district. These are materially correct financial statements. Now the adverse thing comes in the state of Washington. We heavily encourage school districts to report modified accrual using the school district accounting manual. It's what we prescribe. It's what we'd really like the school districts all to use. Well, the federal government, being OMB, who gives you your federal dollars, they prefer everybody to report on GAAP, if at all possible, unless it's required by law to not report on GAAP. They said in the state of Washington, for all extensive purposes, it's required by law to report unmodified accrual, not on GAAP. As a result, we have to put in a paragraph just saying, hey, be aware, we're giving an adverse opinion that these financial statements are not presented in accordance with GAAP, but instead they're presented in accordance with the modified accrual basis of accounting as prescribed in the school district account and OSPI's accounting manual.
And
it doesn't, oh, go for it.
Excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, that's fine.
Mr. Barrett, so what does it take to do a dual listing? Is it more paperwork? Is it more time consuming? Can you enlighten me on that?
Yeah, so you're asking what would it take to basically go to a GAAP financial statement? Is that what you're asking, or what are you asking? Like, what's the results of having an adverse, if any?
I'm saying you said that they didn't do the modified school accrual procedure. We weren't doing 2 of them. We're only doing 1 of them, which is the GAAP, which I understand. And then if I understood you said you're suggesting we should also do this other accounting method to report.
Okay.
So
no, I'm sorry. I did not explain that very well.
Okay.
So Well, I would say, okay, so there's two bases of accounting here. So we have GAAP accounting, which is what like the Microsofts of the world all report, correct? They use GAAP accounting. It's what the federal government would, if in the perfect world, would like everybody to use. But in the state of Washington, we don't make you use GAAP accounting for school districts specifically. In fact, we encourage you to use the modified accrual basis of accounting as prescribed in the accounting manual. That is what Kent did this year and what Kent has done every year is report that way. Part of the reason why is to report GAAP financial statements. It's a ton of resources. I mean, you have to hire CPAs more than you already have. You have to, it's a lot of work. And for school districts, you know, it didn't seem in the state of Washington, it seemed like it was a better idea from the state auditor's office perspective to use the accounting manual instead. It's just an easier way of reporting, and we feel all your constituents get the information they need from it. And in case you're all wondering, well, what does this all mean? It doesn't mean anything. It just has a paragraph in your audit report. The federal government has worked with us and said, hey, you know what? We'll say this is required by law, so we're not going to have any penalty for you not reporting under GAAP. If you were, say, a city that was operating on a different basis of accounting, there's actually kind of a penalty, indirect penalty for not reporting on GAAP from the federal government. But for school districts, that is not the case in the state of Washington. So all they wanted us to do is add one paragraph to that audit report, just saying, hey, be aware that these are not presented in conformance with GAAP. So that means an accountant such as myself would know going into your financial report that I'm not expecting to see certain things that I would see if I was looking at, let's say, like City of Seattle or something.
But when we're looking at a school district that has budgets bigger than cities, why do the cities have to do it and the school districts don't?
You know, it just made more sense. So for school districts, your budgets are on a 1-year basis. So that's why they want your financial statements on that modified accrual, because it more mimics the budget. It's easier to read for budget wise. And that's really what they want. So in government accounting in general, even City of Seattle, not all of their statements are presented in conformance with GAAP. They actually have some statements that aren't, but that is actually the Government Auditing Standards Board that tells us not to do that. So that's not an issue. But even them, like if you went and looked at let's say you want to know what was going on with City of Seattle's general fund. That is actually reported in the same manner that your financial statements for the most part are reported. Because they want, for a general fund, they want it to mimic the budget as closely as possible. And budgets are the current economic focus. So they want to really focus on the next year of operations. Whereas when you start looking at GAAP financial statements, you're looking 5-10 years down the road type analysis.
Okay, yeah. I got it. Thank you very much.
You bet. I love these topics of conversation, so I like the questions.
You're educating me.
Good. I like it. I like it. So hopefully it explained it. You're asking good questions on a very complex topic. I think you're at the federal grant compliance there, Diana.
Correct. So the third type of report we will be issuing is the federal grant compliance report. Once again, it's the same audit scope, the 2020 school year. And the objective of this specific audit is to determine whether the district materially complied with the requirements of receiving federal funding. And we are, once again, pleased to report that we are issuing an unmodified, clean audit opinion on the district's compliance with federal grant requirements, which is what you want to receive because it gives assurance that the funds were expended in accordance with their intended purpose. We also wanted to point out that our audits are conducted in accordance with uniform guidance, and these standards require us to gain an understanding of the district's internal controls to ensure that the federal grant requirements are followed. If we were to find any kind of weaknesses or concerns with that process, we would have to notify you or bring that to your attention. And once again, we are pleased to report that we did not identify any concerns with the district's processes. As you'll see in this slide, we identified no significant deficiencies in internal controls, no deficiencies that we consider to be material weaknesses, and no instances of non-compliance that are required to be reported. In conducting the federal grant compliance audit, we selected the following major programs for our audit. We specifically looked at the elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund program with expenditures totaling $4,887,653. We also looked at Title I grants to local educational agencies with total expenditures being $7,668,119. And these programs represent approximately 43% of your total federal expenditures for the 2020 school year. Any questions on the federal grant audit report? Alrighty.
Don't see any questions.
With that being said, I'll pass it along. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Back to the previous slide. So this is for the 2020 school year. So we're assuming it's after the release of the funds, of the ESSER funds. And was that round? I don't know which round that was.
It was definitely after some of them. It's hard to keep track when we're, especially from an auditor perspective, it's hard for us to keep track when you're getting them. But yes, this first program was part of that funding. The elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund, that's part of that funding, yep.
So that was the round one funding, is that right?
I believe so. Ben, do you know off the top of your head if that's round one? Yeah, that was round one.
Yes, it was.
Okay, thank you.
Luckily, it was pretty straightforward because we were kind of like the district in that you do the best you can until the guidance can come out. And I know with all this funding, things happen so fast with the pandemic that, the Department of Treasury and Department of Commerce, they were getting things out as fast as they can. But sometimes, they were just trying to help everybody they could. So not to have any issues is for any of the districts that we audited. I don't believe we had any issues. So for that program, so we were really pleased with those results. So with that, we can go to the tracker, Diana, if we don't have any more questions or other recommendations. Sorry, I forgot about this one because we're not used to talking about other recommendations here. So we provided some exit conference or the exit item recommendations. Typically, we do not go over these unless we're asked to at the exit conference, but we were asked to go over these exit comments. Let me bring those up really quick. So they exit recommendations, just a reminder, best practices. They're provided to management for consideration. They involve controller compliance as it states here. They're immaterial and they're not referenced in our audit report. And that is the biggest piece that we like to talk about is it's not referenced. The way we talk about them is best practices or housekeeping items. You'll hear people talk about that. It's basically you're doing an excellent job. We just see a little bit room for improvement. So for example, this year, the areas that we noted exit items in were just simple cash reconciliation, change orders, we had a recommendation, self-insurance, we had a recommendation, and enrollment reporting, we had a recommendation. Again, just exit recommendations. Do you all want me to go over those in great detail, just read through them today, or I know they were provided in that packet, it's up to you.
Could you go over them, please?
Yeah, you bet. All right, let me I'll open these one at a time. Just take me 1 second. All right, so for the cash reconciliation, we said, although the district reconciles monthly to cash balances reported by the King County Treasurer's statements, the district does not have a process in place to adequately reconcile revenues and expenditures on a monthly basis. We recommend the district develop procedures to adequately reconcile their general ledger to the county treasurer's statements to ensure revenues and expenditures recorded in their general ledger are supported. Basically, this is a recommendation I'm making at a lot of school districts. A lot of school districts aren't doing this. It seems to be some conflicting information from OSPI and from our office, and I've reported this to our office, the schools team. They are working with OSPI. So Kent School District was not the only school district I had this recommendation with. It is not the only school district I had conversations about what OSPI is telling them to report. And our goal now from after this audit is to get on the same page with OSPI and get some good guidance out there. Basically, my only concern here is that because of the way that a lot of districts are reconciling, they all reconcile ending cash. So your ending cash is there, that's great. And they reconcile some of the big portions of your revenues and expenditures. Again, great. The one thing is we don't have a great way of looking at transfers between accounts. Because the county treasurer, the way they do transfers is pretty complex. They make you report it in the general fund and transfer it to other funds rather than, let's say you have like an ASB deposit, want to put it straight into ASB. They're going to make you put it in the general fund and then transfer it to ASB. Well, that's not really a transfer for reporting purposes. That's just a moving of accounts, just managerial movement of accounts. But the county treasurer reports it to us as a transfer. The district correctly doesn't report it as a transfer. And so we have to reconcile those things and say, okay, what should have been reported as a transfer? What should have not been reported as a transfer? And I'm trying to encourage school districts to basically go through those transfers throughout the year and kind of make notes of, okay, this is why, or this is what is, or some sort of tabulation to give us so we can look at it, just to speed up our audit procedures and just to make sure that something doesn't go awry with transfers down the road. Reason why this is immaterial is because, one, we didn't notice any misstatements. And two, the likelihood of this resulting in a misstatement is minimal. That's why it's a best practice, is because we don't see this leading to a material misstatement, but you never know, right? You always want to have those controls in place if at all possible. And as a district and as a management group, you just have to weigh the cost benefits. You know, it might be you might come back to me next year and say, you know what, we tried this, Alex. It took way too much time, and it just wasn't worth it for us. That's a conversation we have. You know, so that's why we really want to stress exit items it's more of a stepping point to saying, hey, here's a best practice and here's why. And they're definitely all open for discussions. Ben and I had lots of good conversation on this one. And he actually provided me with a lot of good support for me to take to my team and say, hey, this is what districts are being told by OSPI. It conflicts with what I'm saying. Where are we coming from? And so, again, thanks, Ben, for that. And we're getting those conversations started with OSPI now as an office. So the next one, an exit item on change orders. We just noticed the district does not have a procurement policy and or procedures that identify the level of authority required for change orders. We recommend the district update their procurement policy procedures to include the level of authority required for change orders. We saw that change orders were being approved. It just wasn't consistently approved by different people, and it's hard to know who's supposed to approve what if it's not written down in a policy. This is one of those situations where, as a district, you probably have people that have been in place for a long time, and so they know who to go to. They know who to get that approval from. But what happens when they leave? Does the next person that filled their shoes, do they know who to go to for that change order? That's why we like those things written down in policies and procedures. It's just to make sure, you know, everybody, I feel like we all do the best we can hiring people, and the people we have in place, I think, are all doing the best they can. You more worry about who's going to replace them and if there's not adequate training in place, you know, or the trail to follow, basically. So that's why we had that exit recommendation, is just to kind of firm up that process, just to make sure whatever the board wants happening is actually happening there for change orders. Be a good conversation, I feel like, for the board to kind of talk about what would we like to see with change orders. Next one is self-insurance. The founding document for the district's vision self-insurance program is silent on what should happen to the remaining funds of the program when it dissolves. The district consulted with their third-party group about allowable uses of remaining funds in their vision trust account. The proceeds remain in that account pending district's decision as how to deploy these resources. We recommend consulting with your legal counsel about the allowable uses of these remaining funds. So this one is a good example of nobody did anything incorrect. This is a perfect example of a best practice. You're doing the right thing. You had vision self-insurance at one point. You're moving away from that self-insurance. But now you have this residual money that was made for self-insurance that got taken out of employee paychecks and the employer paid portion of it as well. Well, we don't know what stipulations are attached to those. What can you do with those funds? And so the district is wisely holding on to those until they can find out what to do with them. They've consulted with, or you've consulted with your third party. We're advising to consult with your attorney, because that's really going to be able to tell you, that's the person that's going to be able to tell you, hey, this is what you want to do with these funds. This is legally what you can do with these funds. And then retain that documentation for audit purposes is what we recommend. or actually for liability purposes, really. It's a smaller amount that I don't know if we would look at it or not, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody along the road that was an employee said, hey, whatever happened to our money that we put into this when we switched over? So just a good idea to go talk to your attorney and say, hey, what should we do with these funds that we have left over? And then our last one.
Mr. Barrett, before you go on,
Yes.
could you enlighten me to the a rough amount that's in that account balance?
I don't know off the top of my head. Ben, do you have a rough idea on that one?
Yeah, it's about $100,000.
About 100,000. There you go.
Thank you.
So small or large, depending on the perspective, right? From an auditor perspective, that's why I say the odds of us looking at that, unless we, noted some really specific risk. But from your perspective, 100,000 or from an employee's, it could be a lot. So that's why we always advise, good idea to go talk to somebody and let's make sure we're doing this correctly. Now, basic enrollment. Oh, sorry. Do I have another question?
Could I just add a little nugget to that? One of the things that we had that vision program for a very, very long time, predating everybody on the call, I think. And we have not yet seen any documentation that we actually had an employee payroll deduction to subsidize the program. In other words, for the years that we're seeing, it was entirely employer funded. And that's significant in terms of like the degree of freedom you would have to use those funds. So, but it's been in existence for so long, and it was only recently dissolved because of SEB, that it has been truly a historical journey to try to dig up some of the records.
Yeah, so then I definitely recommend consulting, because that would be fantastic. As you can imagine, if you had an extra 100,000 that you could spend, just absorb into the general fund, that'd be fantastic news. So definitely recommend that. And again, I want to express appreciation for the district for just holding on to those funds and doing your due diligence before acting. So this is a perfect example of just, hey, keep this in consideration. So last one, and this is actually done by our schools team. This was not done by my team directly, is basic enrollment reporting. Sometimes they come out and they do these apportionment testing for us, because that's what they do, is apportionment. So they can do these tests very efficiently. They know exactly what they're looking at, and they can do them even remotely before the pandemic. So every once in a while, we just get help from that schools team. So what they found was they tested roughly 371 FTE at Kent Meridian High School in February 2020, the 11th grade, and found 0.27 FTE overreported. We found the enrollment system reported FTE on more weekly minutes than was represented in the high school bell schedule, resulting in the FTE for zero period being overstated by 0.03, which impacted partially enrolled students scheduled for zero period. We recommend the district ensure FTE reported reflects total weekly minutes represented in the high school bell schedule. 0.27 FTE out of 371.48 tested is minuscule. So the main reason we wrote this up for you to bring to your attention is because the bell schedule was off. The bell schedule, if you don't know, is what is used to calculate the FTE per class period and per passing period for all your students. And then that FTE is what's used to report to OSPI to get your funding for enrollment. So it's really important to have that bell schedule 100% correct. Otherwise, it can throw off your apportionment all over the place. Luckily, in this case, a 0.03 for just the zero period, we're talking very small population that was affected there, because not all of your students have a zero period, and 0.03 is very small to begin with. So most classes, just so you know for perspective, have 1 FTE per class. The 50-minute course has a 1 FTE typically, I believe. It's been a while since I've looked at enrollment, but from trying to jog my memory, I believe it's 1 FTE per 50 minutes of instruction. It's usually what it is. So you can imagine 0.03, we're talking about 5 minutes, which is common for passing time. So what happens is that passing time at the beginning, my guess is the passing time at the beginning of the day was being counted, and it shouldn't happen. That would be my guess. But I'm sure the schools team talked to your enrollment person about this. And this is, if you can't catch on, one of the reasons why we don't normally talk about exit items at an exit conference is because we're really in the weeds here. With all of these exit items, I mean, for a board, we're really in the weeds here. And so that's why a lot of times we just share it with management. Not to say it's not a good idea to talk about it with the board. I think it speaks volumes about the accountability of the district that your management told us, hey, we think the board would be interested in these exit items. Let's talk about it. So with that, any questions on any of these items that I just shared with you?
I have a question about the transfer process. When you're saying about making a note so it'd be easier to do your auditing on that, would that be like some kind of a notation, like an asterisk, and then you'd go to some kind of manual or something you'd written why that was done, or would it be written on the actual document itself? How would you keep a record of all that?
So I leave that up to the district, and honestly, I look at it for reasonableness. What I would do if I was in the district shoes, I'd probably just track it in a spreadsheet, because one, we're talking about the transfers that you reported on your F-196. So you can't really make notations on that or anything else. Right. We're just looking for the audit support behind that. And that support can be as simple as a spreadsheet where you just go through and say, in the month of November, the county reported 1 million in transfers. As a school district, we only put 100,000 on our F-196. The $900,000 difference is because of blank.
Okay.
And since I'm an auditor with that experience, and same with my team, we can go in there and we look at it, and it's pretty easy to tell if that's a reasonable thing or not. Because you can say, yep, we've audited a lot of school districts. That happens all the time. And then if we don't see it, then then we might ask those questions. Right now, we don't have anything to go by. But if we ask for the support, we can get it. It just takes a lot of time. And at $113 an hour, I don't know if it's more advantageous for us to do that or for your district staff to do that. That, again, is a conversation for your management team to go, if Ben got together and with his finance director and everybody else and you do together, they said, you know what, it's taking us longer to do this than we thought. And we'd rather pay the auditor's office to do this. I've had an entity do that with me before because they did the work and they said, you know what, to us for the dollar benefit analysis, we're going to let you do it. Again, so that's why it's a best practice. And it's a good control to have in place just to help ensure nothing significant happens, because there's always that small likelihood it could. But again, in this case, we determined the likelihood of that is remote.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions on any of this that I covered?
I know I just was I reviewed my notes from when we met in February for a risk. And so the two policies that I asked you to look at, and then the one vendor, did that get looked at?
What ones were those again, Michelle? I didn't have those on the email, so we might have missed them or we might have grabbed them. I'd have to follow up.
Okay. So that was policy 6001 and 6001P and 6002.
I think we reviewed those last year. Are we talking about the Luve Alaview? Is that where this would fall into?
No, those are just those are in our 6000 series policies.
I'll have to look, Michelle, to see if we looked at those. If that was an area, so for policy, it's interesting. We can't just look at a policy and tell you, is this policy adequate or not? We have to be your independent, objective auditor. So the second we give a blessing on a policy, we can no longer audit anything associated with that policy. So there's not a lot we can do with those. If you have a specific example of where you thought policy wasn't followed, that is where we can step in and say, hey, what is it exactly that we should have had? What happened? What should have happened? But just like policies in general, giving us policies and saying, hey, look at this, there's nothing I could tell you on those.
Okay. And then the vendor, you didn't look into that vendor either?
And what vendor was that?
The micro K-12 microcomputer systems.
I don't believe we did. Diana, does that ring a bell?
Okay.
No.
I apologize, Michelle, if I missed that in our conversation. But we can definitely make a note, or if you shoot me an email, we can look into those next year. If we see a risk, if there's something we're specifically worried about, just articulate what that is, and we can definitely look into it.
Okay, that's what I thought we talked about on the 22nd, but okay. Alrighty.
Perfect. Any other questions? Okay. So now on to the next slide. So Tracker. So Trackers, it's always been around this system, but we've revamped it. So Tracker, the main things we want to tell you today that we've revamped, and I'm not sure if this was part of last year's exit or not, so sorry if this is repeat information, but ever occasionally, we write findings to entities, right? And these entities might get questions throughout the year about what is the progress of these findings? What are you doing to address these findings? And you basically just have to tell whoever it is asking those questions, word of mouth, tell them. And you might have to do it repeatedly as these questions arise. Well, this system now allows you to go in and write as a district what you have done to address a finding. That will be external facing. So anybody can go out to our website and look at that and say, here's a finding for Kent School District if you had one. And then Kent School District could write their response, and then anytime, or whatever they did, and then anytime somebody asked you, you could point to them and say, hey, just go check it out on the tracker. We have the information out there. And when the auditor's office comes back out, they'll confirm our response. And we will definitely do that anytime there's a finding. And so it just allows you another avenue to be able to inform your constituents what's going on. The other portion of Tracker that I think is very beneficial to the district as a whole is anybody that has access to your SAW account, so in this case, Ben, for you, those of you that don't know what a SAW account is, it's your account with our office to submit reports and to ask help desk questions, things like that sort. It allows you to go in through that system and you can look at the whole history of Kent School District, exit items, management letters, and findings all the way back to 2004, I believe, is where that goes. Not the most user-friendly system for tracking that. So you have to go one by one and it's not formatted very well because it was an older system for a while and then revamped. But that is out there. And I always like to point that out because, again, if you ever have somebody in place and then there's turnover, it'd be nice coming in being, okay, what's the history of the district so I know what kind of recommendations were made, especially in the last couple of years, if somebody were to come into a prominent accounting position. It would just give them a good place to go and say, okay, here's what the history of the district is. So we just want to give you a heads up on that. Again, not very pertinent to you this year because you don't have a finding. But again, if you were, we'd spend a little bit more time on this. And again, since it's a good segue into this, anytime we have the board, it's good reminder just to tell you a finding. So you might be sitting there going, oh yeah, what was a finding again? So a finding is the most significant issue we write. It's written in a document included fully in your audit report. We ask for a response from the district to that finding. Your response or synopsis of it is also included in that finding and published in your report. So if I went out to SAL's website, pulled down the report, there would be the finding. I could read it in full as a citizen. The next step down, still a significant issue, but not as significant, is a management letter. That is a written documented issue signed in a letter by myself, written out to management. We go over those in detail at all exit conferences. Those are referenced in the audit report. So for example, let's say it was in payroll, you would say, we noted matters in the form of we noted matters in payroll in the form of a letter, which we gave to management. That's all it would say in your audit report. The whole basis of the management letter, the whole substance, that would not be included. Sometimes you'll get public records requests for that information. Typically you don't for management letter. It's usually the findings that get all the attention, but every once in a while I've seen management letters get some attention. So, but rest assured as a board, you will know if we have a finding or management letter because we'll definitely go over those in great detail at these exit conferences. Lastly, we have those exit recommendations, which we went over. Best practices, housekeeping items, not referenced in the audit report, not included in the audit report, discussed only with management unless they want us to share it with the board, in which case we've shared it with the board. Also as a board, and I had one this year, you can reach out to me anytime and I can get you these items. I mean, I can go, if you want to know what the exit items are, they're open to public record. I'm not going to make you go through a public records request to get this information. Just email me, I can get them to you. It may take some time. We have a lot of audits. Not, Kent School District, definitely not our only school district or audit. So it could take me some time, especially depending on the format and how many years you want, but it is definitely something I can get you if you ever want it, if you want to look through those. So we're not saying exit items can't be looked at by the board. There definitely can be, and if you ever want us to, just voice that and we'll definitely go over those. But again, just wanted to go over those levels of reporting. So this year, Kent School District, no management letters, no findings. All we had was those 4 exit recommendations. So any questions on all the information I just covered? Okay.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Barrett.
Oh, no, you're good.
Let's see. So did I understand correctly? So these exit items are also forward facing or external facing?
No, they are not. Only
They're
internal.
not. So
They're not. Yep.
only findings are external
Only
facing.
findings. Yep. Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Not even management letters are external facing. Only the findings. Yes.
Okay. So for the external, I mean, I think it's good for us to know about what are our practices and what it could be. So can we get multiple years, or do they have to be pulled from? When you say internal, it's available in Tracker internally.
So Ben can get you those in Tracker. I've actually pulled for one of your board members already since 2014, all your exit recommendations in a nice PDF. Took a while to format that thing, but it's actually pretty it's readable. So if you want me to forward you that, I definitely can. And Michelle, were you going to add something?
I was going to say I can share it. Yeah, because I asked for that too, so I can share it. I think I'll send it to Naomi, and then I think she can share it out.
Those documents were actually shared in the board update this past Friday.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I was like. I just scrolled through to see that, because I must have missed it in the attachments. I thought I read all the attachments, but thank you.
Yeah, so my question was not to gain access to that, but just moving forward, like how can we compare the progress, of what's happened? So for that, we would have to come back to you, is what you're saying.
Yeah. And just know that your management team knows you want to hear these things. So that's why we talked about the exits today. And I wouldn't foresee that changing in the future either. Ben could probably speak more to that, but he's the one that told me, hey, let's talk about these because the board's going to want to know at this exit. So I wouldn't anticipate that changing going forward. So you'll probably know at every one of these exits what we're going through. But if not, we'll always at least tell you we had them, but we're not going to share them at this forum because management decided not to. You could stop right there and be like, oh no, I want to know right now. And I would definitely stop and say, absolutely, we'll let you know and we can go through that. That's not a problem at all. The only one you cannot get access to, and Michelle, this is one I left one out in your exit item thing, IT recommendations. IT recommendations are confidential. You as a board can see them, but you need to go into we advise you go into executive session to see those. So just keep that in mind because you don't want to advertise your IT issues out to the public because that will put you at a huge risk to the public. So it was a few years back, nothing significant. It's been addressed, just so you know. But if we ever have IT recommendations, we can tell you that. We would just need to go into an executive session to discuss those because they are confidential. So just be aware of that one. All righty. So now on to the next one. Closing remarks. All right. So at the beginning of the audit, we estimated a cost in that engagement letter. We are right on track with that engagement letter. Thank you to your staff for getting us the information timely so we can do that. Next scheduled audit, December 2021. Little optimistic. It will probably be December through February, sometime in there. We work with your management team to see what works best for them. Fully anticipating next year will be done about a month earlier because I don't foresee them extending the federal audit clearinghouse deadline next year. They did do that this year. So every year, just so you know, we submit your audit package to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse saying, hey, look, we did a federal audit. So, they're good. They extended that deadline. Normally it's May 30th, but now it's September 30th, I believe, off the top of my head. It's either August 30th or September 30th. We're going to get that, Ben, just so you know, next week. Well, we're going to start it this week. We'll have it certified either by Friday or Monday. But next year will probably be about a month earlier. But again, we always work with your management team on that to see what works best for them. Again, those audits will include the same areas that they include every year: your accountability, your financial statement, and your federal programs audit. No surprises there. And the estimated cost should be the same as this year. as of right now, we aren't planning any audit cost increases this next year. And a year from now, maybe. It all just depends. You know, they just passed the new budget, and the new budget did have a new federal holiday in it. They didn't authorize, or it had a new state holiday in it. They didn't authorize COLAs, so they're kind of up in the air, but at least for 2000, it's always odd for me for school years. So at least for your next scheduled audit, I don't anticipate a rate increase. Again, we always try to make those rate increase pretty minimal though as well. So we'll give you a heads up long before that happens too. So big on not having any surprises there. Any questions on that at all? Okay. So we can go on to the next one. Report publication. So as we mentioned, we should have these reports. They're ready to publish today. We haven't got any comments on them, so we'll go ahead and publish those today. Those should come out. We're on Tuesday, maybe Thursday at the earliest, but I would anticipate Monday. We have a link here. You can sign up for our services if you haven't already to get a notification when audit reports are released. You can actually do it for all the school districts in the area, any audits in the area, really. So if there's certain entities you want to pay more attention to, sign up for that service. We won't send you a link, again, for cybersecurity reasons, but you'll at least get informed, hey, go out to our website, it's there. Avoid links as much as possible in your emails in case you don't know. And then audit survey attached to both of those reports, the accountability and the financial federal, there's an audit survey. Appreciate any feedback, especially during this pandemic. You know, we're doing things different. We're all learning on the fly, just like your management team is, just trying to get through this together. So if there's things that we did well that you'd like us to see continue, let us know. If there's things that you say, hey, next year, especially if we're still remote, here's some things you could do different, let us know. And Ben, you can forward those to anybody you want inside the district, board members, anybody. We work with a lot of people at your school district when we do an audit, as you can tell from those accountability areas. So anybody you feel like we worked with a lot and you just say, hey, maybe we want somebody else's feedback this year, you can forward that survey to them. All feedback is good feedback, in my opinion. So it's all very useful information to have. Next slide. So that's the end of our presentation. We definitely have times for questions, but really quick, just wants to thank the district for their commitment to fiscal accountability and accurate financial reporting. Also want to thank the district for their time, especially during the federal grant compliance audit. Those always take a lot of time, especially when operating remotely. Those are tough audits to get done remotely. The financial audit, not as difficult, but those accountability and federal audits, they can be difficult. So kind of happy next year. Hopefully we'll be back to some sort of hybrid model where we're back on site in some form, and hopefully that will result in some efficiencies as well. But again, all in all, it was a really good audit. I alluded to Ben and I having some conversations about the X items. I thought we had really good conversations this year, and not only hopefully did we help you, but Ben, you helped me, take some information to my teams, and you were the first district to bring that to me. So it was kind of nice when I had a couple other districts come in and bring that to me and say, hey, I'm familiar. So I was able to talk about it knowingly then. So I appreciate that again, Ben. And then I always like to end these with just pointing out, it's you start getting these clean financial reports, and you almost think it's a foregone conclusion that you're going to get clean financial statement audit opinions. It is definitely not a foregone conclusion. Our office does write findings. They do happen quite frequently. So I just always like to say kudos on having that clean audit. It is not easy to get through. And in this audit, I'm trying to go through and see when I'm not even sure when your last financial statement audit finding was. I think it's been some time. They combine the financial federal, so it's hard to tell, but it's been a long time since we've had a fighting over the financial statements. So kudos to your staff for that, and in over accountability as well. So again, definitely seeing improvements, and everybody's implementing our recommendations when we make them. And I just feel like we're really developing that relationship, being that Diana and I are still pretty new to this engagement. So I feel like we're really making headway on that. So that's all we have for you today. Do we have any questions in closing at all? No? And again, I want to apologize, Michelle, that I missed that vendor. I know we talked about it a lot, but it's no excuse to miss that. So if you want us to look at it next year, you give me a heads up. And if you have something specific, I'll circle that in. We'll do better at getting that in there, definitely.
Great. And thank you, Dr. Harmon, for pointing that out. When I try and look at those on my phone, I somehow miss them, but I knew they had to be there somewhere, and I found the form. So thank you for that.
Perfect.
I appreciate it. Yeah, and I've looked at the tracker earlier this week. I looked at the tracker. It's really easy to use. So thank you. And something I neglected to mention at the beginning is that President Daniels is absent tonight. So I needed to note that. So if anyone else, does anyone have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions, but I do appreciate Mr. Barron and Ms. Kovalich. Thank you so much for coming in. And I think that your team has been the most thorough in explaining these reports over the years. So I've been here 8 years. It's probably my last year with you all. And yeah, it was very helpful for me as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that feedback. My goal is just, try to communicate as much as possible. If you can't tell, I love to talk. So if you ever have questions, definitely more than willing to have those conversations, even throughout the school year. It's no additional cost to you. I have time set aside every week to talk to, especially board members, but really anybody from government that has any questions. I think it's one of the most valuable services we can really provide. I mean, we all get in government for the same reason, I'd like to believe, and that's to help the people that we live around. So any way I can help you serve those people, that's what we want to do.
Yes. Thank you very much for being here. I would agree. I've watched these for a long time, and it's very helpful. And it's helpful to hear the exit items. And then as a note, I'm going to send what you sent me. I'm going to send it to Naomi so she can share that. So yeah, Mr. Barrett and Ms. Kovalich. How do you pronounce your last name?
Kovalich.
Kovalich. Thank you very much for being here. Any other comments for the good of the order? Okay, if there are no more comments, it is officially 6:31 p.m. And yes, thank you, Mr. Rarick, Dr. Watson team, and Dr. Harmon, everyone who helped with the audit. It's 6:31 p.m. So with that, I'm going to end this meeting. Thank you, everyone.
See you all next year. Good to see you again. Stay cool this weekend too.